right, welcome friends and explorers. Thanks so much for joining. I think we have a few other folks that are going to be joining, but we're going to jump right in. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. Well, thanks again. My name is Julie. I'm here from Wilderness Inquiry. We are a nonprofit organization in Minnesota that connects people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities to the natural world and each other through shared outdoor adventures. So today, this program is part of our virtual series, and we do trips to the Boundary Waters, Apostle Islands, Yellowstone. Anybody here like to go outside? Yeah? Oh, many of our friends like to go outside. So we love to go outside to all these different places. And today we have a special book reading about the outdoors, the Mississippi River, which is one of our favorite places to go outside and explore. We have other virtual series you can check out on our website, wildernessinquiry.org. So today's book reading is about the Mississippi River. And anybody been to the Mississippi River before? Some folks, some friends have. Cool. So this is it's a 72-mile, 54,000 acre protected corridor is the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. It's the only national park site that is dedicated exclusively to the Mississippi River that runs right through Minneapolis and St. Paul. We also want to acknowledge that we're on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary land of the Dakota people, and we honor with gratitude the people who have stewarded the land throughout generations and their ongoing contributions to this region. At Wilderness Inquiry, it's our responsibility to acknowledge this historical context and ongoing injustices that we have committed against the Dakota Nation and commit to supporting sovereignty of Native nations in this territory and beyond. He is an author of young adult novels, the 4 for 4 middle grade series, and numerous fiction books, including If We Were Gone and My Mighty Journey. He lives in Minneapolis by the Mississippi River on Dakota land and visits schools around the world.
Now, boys and girls, we're going to try and read it, and you're going to look at the images. These images are all made from things collected along the Mississippi River, and we'll talk a little bit about the art at the end. And I'll read the text and you'll look at these images. I am a powerful waterfall. I listen, I pay attention, I have a long memory. You might find it hard to believe, but I have moved through time. So the waterfall is moving and telling its own story. Now on this one, we turn the image. I remember 12,000 years ago, water roars over my massive face, wearing away my sandstone body. My limestone ledges jut out, and when these crack and crash below, my new stone face emerges upriver from the fallen rock. When the river splits in two, I move back with the smaller branch. Nearby, men throw spears into the belly of a woolly mammoth. They give thanks to the animal because they're desperate for food. Do you see those spear points at the bottom of the image there? Those are real rubbings of actual spear points that were found by the river. Where a creek joins the river, ice hangs off my face like a beard. People sit around a fire telling stories about me. Off my shoulder, a pack of wolves, silhouetted in the moonlight, searches for something to eat. As I move up the narrow gorge, I become smaller. A boy and his grandfather catch fish below me. The grandfather describes how I've changed, so the boy will be able to tell his grandchild. Do you see that fish hook there at the bottom? That's a rubbing of an actual copper fish hook from the river as well. When an island is in the middle of me, a Dakota man who calls me a Wamni Yamni offers a decorated beaver robe and asks for blessings. On the bank, a Franciscan priest claims he's discovered me and says my name is Le Sault Saint-Antoine de Padua, the Falls of St. Anthony of Padua. When I recede again, a mother and daughter taste choke cherries and decide the fruit's not quite ripe. Back in their garden, they check corn and beans and squash. The girl looks up at me, then waters thirsty plants. And over there on the right, that's an old drawing of the waterfall. Okay, here's a page, no words on it. Things are about to change a lot for the waterfall. People pour in and scramble to harness my power. Belts hum, blades spin, and metal clanks as white pine is cut into lumber. When booms break, logs escape, crashing over my face and jamming in front of me. As I move farther upriver, workers begin a tunnel from one island to another, but disaster strikes. The tunnel collapses and a whirlpool sucks debris and blasts it out the other end. The falls is going out, a boy yells. I'm terrified that this is the end. The break expands and I panic. Finally, men build dams and fill the tunnel. Later, they put up a cement wall and construct a wooden apron on top of me. I am cramped and cannot see, but it's the only way to save me. After my long journey, I'm locked in place. It's painful to be confined while so much changes nearby. Trains of wheat roll in. Up goes the largest flour mill ever built. Passengers cross the Stone Arch Bridge and call out when they see me. Minneapolis uses my power and boasts of making the best and most flour in the world. But as electricity replaces water power, mills in the area shut down. Workers create a huge lock to move boats and barges around me. An observation deck opens and a girl admires my new concrete cover. But barge traffic is less than planned and business near me declines. Abandoned buildings crumble, the last train crosses the bridge, and men put up a fence to keep trespassers off. A fire breaks out in an old mill and blazes in the night. Far fewer visitors find me. Today, the Stone Arch Bridge is open to walkers, runners, and bikers. Nearby, Dakota drummers pound out beats and sing the old songs. Former mills have been converted into places to live and work. Once again, people come to me. After my mighty journey, 15 miles over 12,000 years, I stay in this spot. I am no longer as massive as I was. I don't receive as many offerings, but I am still powerful. I am still here. The end. Now, look at this picture here. Sometimes if you look closely at that, you might just think that's a photograph, but that's all made by hand. That's made from one block of wood, and all of the details are carved into it. And that is made by the illustrator Gaylord Shanelack, and that's an example of a wood block print. So even these tiny lines of the power lines going there, that's all made into that block of wood. And Gaylord is just a tremendous artist, and we are so happy that he worked on the art on this book. As I said before, everything in the book was collected from things along the river. And I'll close my screen now so you can see me and we can talk a little bit more about this process.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so how many of you have been down to the river recently? Raise your hand if you've been down by the Mississippi River. Really good time to go down there. A lot is changing And this is a story I started working on 23 years ago. It takes sometimes a long time to make a book. So I started working on this story. I wanted to tell this story. This is the story of the only major waterfall on the Mississippi River. And how many of you have been downtown St. Paul, have been downtown in St. Paul by the mounds where the bridges cross the river? That's where the waterfall used to be. A long time ago, 12,000 years ago, that's where the waterfall used to be. And the waterfall, it's limestone on top of sandstone. And limestone is hard, but sandstone is soft. Sandstone, you can even scratch in the stone and the stone will come off. So as the water would go over the top of the waterfall, it would wear away the sandstone underneath and a chunk of limestone would stick out. And then what do you think would happen eventually to that chunk of limestone sticking out as the sandstone eroded underneath? That's right, it would just collapse. It would fall down and collapse. And so that would be in the river, and then the waterfall would move back a little bit. So over time, that waterfall moved all the way from St. Paul, where St. Paul is now, to where Minneapolis is, downtown Minneapolis. So anytime you're down by the river between Minneapolis and St. Paul, you can imagine that waterfall going all across the bluff. If you're down at Minnehaha Park, or if you're at Hidden Falls, or you're at Crosby, just imagine a waterfall going all the way across that valley, and that's where it was. So this story, My Mighty Journey, tells the story of the waterfall moving up and what people who were living here were doing at the time. So people have been living here for 12,000 years, right next to the river, and the waterfall has been an important part of that all along. At the end of the question, at the end of the book, there's a question about what do you think will happen here next? What do you think will happen down by where the waterfall is now? Any of you who've been down there lately realize that there's some big changes. There's a new restaurant going in that's going to have native food by Sean Sherman. So that's going to be food that was grown here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then the big lock and dam, do you remember that picture that had the lock and dam in it? That's no longer being used, and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And so there's lots of discussion and lots of debate about what's going to happen down by the waterfall. Anybody have any ideas of what you'd like to see happen down there? Anybody want to raise a hand?
Any ideas? What would you like to see at a waterfall? What do we have an idea there? If anybody wants to share, you can unmute yourselves. You can use the chat.
So does everybody understand that right now the waterfall that's down, that is in downtown Minneapolis, does everybody understand that that is covered up? It has a cover on top of it. So, you know, when you watch it, that water slides down and comes up. There's one spot over on the side of the falls where the original falls is there. And some people are talking about maybe it would be fun to run some water over that. How many of you would like to be able to see what the falls looked like without a wall on top at some place? Raise your hand. Yeah, that would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Now, the lock and dam is there, and there's going to be a new big visitor center built there. Kind of question, Julie Wright, is what to do with the old lock and dam, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And they had to take 2 arches out of the bridge for that. So that's going to be very interesting. So you are going to get to watch. That area has changed a lot over the last 100 years, and it's going to change a lot in the next few years as well. Anybody have any questions on the process of making this book? How I wrote the story, how we made the art, how we worked together? What would you like to know? Jake, you got a question? Can you press unmute?
Yeah, how did you make how did you get like the spearheads from the river?
That's an excellent question. When we were working on the book, we had a group of people who were working together, and we went out to the Minnesota Historical Society. They have a collection of all the old spear points. And Patricia Emerson got some of the ones out that she thought we would be interested in looking. Of course, we were interested in the oldest ones. And then she let us gently rub on those spearheads to make copies. And then she was the one who told us while we were doing that, she said, you should really look at copper fish hooks too, because the copper fish hooks were made with copper that was here in Minnesota. And so we used both of those. Does everybody understand on that page with the spear points where they are using those to hunt woolly mammoths, gigantic woolly mammoths? Does everybody understand that woolly mammoths used to live right here where we are now? Pretty cool, huh? How many of you have been over to the Bell Museum and seen that big woolly mammoth they have over there? Okay, you don't even have to go in. If you drive by the Bell Museum at night, they light up the woolly mammoth and you can see it through the window. That's worth seeing because those woolly mammoths were huge. Okay, who else has a question? You can ask anything else you want.
And feel free, if you prefer, you can ask your questions in the chat box or just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, and that fish hook, the fish hook we were talking about is about 2,000 years old, that one that's pictured in the book.
John, there is a question in the chat here. Who drew all the pictures? So maybe you could speak a little bit about that. I know you were explaining the wood blocks a little bit, but if you could share a little bit more about that. Okay, so this is really fun. These pictures are made from printing. So it's not an actual drawing. Gaylord Shanilak is the lead artist, but there was a group of 12 people who worked with him. And all of that stuff is stuff that we collected from the river, and then it would be put in a press, and then a piece of paper would be rolled over it, and it would take the imprint of what was on that. So some of the material was wood, some of the material was, you know, like blocks, like rock. Some of it was even plants. That page, couple of pages that have plants, we figured out a way where we could take plants because we wanted to have some of the plants that people grew, like corn and beans and squash. And so that team, at the back of the book, there's some pictures of everybody who was involved in that process, who made the art. That's great, thank you. John, we have another question. Wes would like to know, how does a river split? What does that mean, how a river splits? Okay, so we have to go back a way to explain how much water there was. So this goes back all the way to when the glaciers were melting. And there was a huge, huge lake up in northern Minnesota. It was just enormous. And that water all flowed down what's now the Minnesota River Valley. And that flowed in. And so where a river splits, it's the other way you can look at that is where rivers meet. So at Fort Snelling there, the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers come together. But if you're on a boat and you're coming upriver, then you get to a place where the river goes, one part of the river goes one way and one part goes the other way. So that the split is the same as coming together. And so when you're coming upriver, you can go along the Minnesota River there, or the other part splits, and that's what the Mississippi River is. So the Mississippi River
that goes through downtown Minneapolis, that meets the Minnesota right there at Fort Snelling. And that's what we're talking about, is the place where the rivers split. You could also say the place where the rivers join. And that's a very, very important place for Dakota people, the Dakota people who were here before any Europeans arrived. Look at this book. This book is not the size of a regular book. Because the waterfall is so big, the book had to be bigger.
Mhm.
And then on that page where they show the waterfall, we were trying, how can we make a picture of that big waterfall? And we decided that the only way to do it, so this is the picture of the waterfall to begin with. We decided the way to do it was to make it so big that you have to turn the page to see it like that. So getting a copy of that book, that is really, really nice, Julie. Thank you for making that possible for everybody to get that.
Absolutely. I'm excited to share that.
Anybody have any guesses? Sean Sherman's going to open this restaurant right down by the waterfall, right at the end of the Stone Arch Bridge. And they're working away on that. That's going to be opened up, they hope, very soon. Anybody have any guesses as to what kind of food would have been some of the traditional food that would have been grown here, that people would have eaten, either grown, collected, or hunted before the Europeans came? What do you think people ate?
We have some guesses in the chat. We have acorns.
Acorns, good. Acorns were here. What else was here? What did the native people
Corn,
who
wheat,
lived here?
Corn, wheat, and venison.
So corn
Berries.
was here. Venison was here. Berries, right?
Mm-hmm. Someone guessed beaver.
Yeah.
Rice?
Big animals.
Bison, exactly. Bison was very, very important. Moose, yep.
Bear.
Mm-hmm. What do people still hunt in Minnesota here that would have been here then too? Deer, yeah, exactly. Okay, how about things that people forage, that people collect? We've got berries, we've got acorns. Anything else? Wild rice, raspberries, mushrooms, exactly. There would have been mushrooms around. One kind of nut. Anybody guess what kind of nut? Hazelnuts. There we go. Okay, everything, excellent. So there's loads of food and lots of food. People got lots of food that they collected, that came, that just appeared each year. What about, what were some things grown as crops? We already mentioned corn, so we've got corn. And a lot of these things that were grown here were not grown in Europe at the time. They were native to here. No wheat, no bean, no soybeans, but other kinds of beans. Yeah, so the three big squash, exactly right. Corn and beans and squash were three main, they were called three sisters. They were growing together. Lots of squash, some other foods from the Americas that were not grown in Europe at that time. Tomatoes, potatoes. Potatoes were growing in South America. That story of how food moved around is really interesting. So in Sean Sherman's restaurant, they will focus on foods that were here originally. So when it's open, you can go down there and you can try some different foods that way.
We had some other guesses with pumpkin, carrots.
Pumpkin, definitely. Pumpkins from that same family, like the squashes. Yeah. How many of you like going down by the river for your walks during this time where people are gathering outside or spending time outside. How many of you like going down to the river for a walk?
Or other areas of water if you don't live by the river too, maybe. Might have some friends from afar.
Yeah, that is a great thing to do this weekend, is to go by a river and just take a walk by the river and pay attention to what you notice for things growing, what you notice for sounds, what's around you. Pay attention and you'll see all kinds of things.
Excellent. Well, I know we were coming up on time here. Do any of our friends have any final questions or things that you want to share with our special guest, author John?
Yeah, someone said they used to train for whitewater slalom racing down by the falls. Christine, that's very, very interesting, because one of the proposals floating around is whether to take out the lock and dam and let more water run through there, making that whole area more of a kind of rapids area rather than pools. So all kinds of interesting stuff being talked about. Okay, back to you, Julie.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very much. And we appreciate everybody joining today. And John, thank you so much for sharing not just your beautiful book and story, but all of the expertise that you have about the river and the area. Again, let's do maybe a round of applause for John. Thank you, John. Do you have any closing thoughts for us as we go out into this beautiful day?
But just make a point of getting out. It's going to be a beautiful weekend. Make a point of getting outside and then talk about what you notice with each other, with the people you're with, because there are some really interesting things happening right now. And then if you like the book, tell your friends about it and tell them how long people have lived here. And you can talk with them about some of the ways that the falls moved. They may not believe that. And you can also tell them about some of the things people have been eating here for a long time too. And then when the new restaurant opens, go on down and check it out, and you'll have a big head start on knowing some of the things that you might get to eat there. So thank you all for showing up on a Saturday morning, and have just a beautiful day.